be unafraid to put your hands up for things you know nothing about, because you can always learn. There are always people who know more than you about any given topic on any given day, and be open enough to and humble enough to ask them, and be open enough to reach out to them when you need to. Um, your career is not just your career; it's collective journey, as I mentioned earlier as well. And you will only be as successful as the individuals you are able to empower and enable. So hoarding information might seem like the way to protect your job, but it's also unfortunately the way to stifle your growth.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the Future of Security Operations podcast. I'm here today with Prima Virani. Prima is a security engineer who has worked across industries as varied as oil and gas, fintech, before becoming principal security engineer at Twilio. She has over a decade of experience spanning infrastructure, security engineering, incident detection, response, and forensics. She's shared insights on a number of really cool podcasts and countless security conferences around the world, including Sector Canada and Agile India. It is great to have you on the podcast, Prima.
Thank you so much. It's really nice talking to you, Thomas, and I'm really looking forward to our little conversation here today.
Me too. When I was listening to you on some other podcasts, it was really clear that you had a super early introduction to the industry. I heard you were 16 when you started pursuing a career in security. Can you tell me a little bit more about, what attracted you to the industry?
Yes, so not quite pursuing a career in the industry at 16, I'd say, but definitely entertaining the idea of doing so.
Okay.
That was, for me, kind of early days of internet, because internet in India became a lot more prevalent in mid to late 2000s. And I happened to be one of the early adopters. So, for example, in my classroom, full of, say, 60 people, I was the only one with active, regular, daily internet access for at least 3 to 4 years, partially, thanks to my father being a very curious person and just loving new technologies in general. So that's how, internet access happened for me. And the more there were, like, back in those days, there were a lot of forums. There was this social media platform called Orkut that was really
Oh,
famous
yeah.
before Facebook was a thing. And while the world was on MySpace, mostly America was on MySpace, India and Brazil somehow, had a big Orkut adoption.
Europe were on Bebo at the time, I think. That was a phase.
Yeah, sounds about right. I remember these were, Yahoo Messenger days.
Mhm.
MSN, some people were like raving about MSN. The rest of us were, big time Yahoo loyalists. And that was the environment basically. And of course, the more I spoke to people, there were a lot of nerds I was hanging out with because I
Mhm.
was one of them. And every day I was just learning something new or another. My life changed the day I learned about browser history, for example. So, that opened me up to just how much you could do both investigatively as well as maliciously if you were
Yeah.
to basically just manipulate people and manipulate situations around you. And later, after my grade 10, at this kind of career guidance seminar type of a thing, I heard this word called like cyber law and cyber crimes and career in it potentially. And
Mhm.
that was just, the person who was conducting the seminar was just throwing buzzwords around really. But that one really stuck. And I went back, spoke to my parents about it, and my dad was immediately convinced that this would be a very exciting thing to do.
Wow.
And then, it's been a journey ever since. That's what led me to Australia ultimately. And there I was, living there for about 6 years. I did my graduation over there. I majored in cybersecurity and specifically on the forensics side of it, and
Hmm.
also information security management. Eventually landed a career in the security industry, and then been working ever since. So it's literally taken me around the world.
Fascinating. Yeah, it's really, first of all, like props to you for recognizing that cybersecurity was going to be a big thing. I think a lot of people missed out on that, and same, like props to bringing it home and your parents saying, actually, this sounds really interesting. Go give it a shot. It's clear that being an early adopter pays off. Um, I'm curious as to that. Like forensics was obviously was a much bigger part of security. Not that it's not a big part of security now, but it was a much bigger part of security back then. And it sounds like you studied that as part of your major. I suppose what turned you off into more detection and response, or did you stick at forensics for a little bit?
So credit for that one goes to my early mentor. His name is Eric Appleboom. Big shout out to him. He was
Nice.
my first mentor and manager at my first job back in Australia at Inpex, the oil and gas company. Eric is a wonderful security practitioner and a very wise individual, I would say. So back then, I was very kind of stuck on forensics, I would say, for a lack
Hmm.
of a better term. And forensics was a very exciting thing to do. That's something I had studied, and I was good at it as well. Luckily, not always are you interested in something and also good at it. Here, there was a match, so very lucky. And I kept, talking to Eric about how I ultimately want to, do forensics, and I don't want to be on the blue team side of things, blue team as we now call it. Back
Yeah.
then, we called it, I don't remember what we call it, just defense side of things.
Hmm.
And Eric facilitated a conversation for me with somebody who worked with the Australian Federal Police. I'm forgetting the name of that gentleman, but he was very generous with his time as well. And we had a good, hour-long conversation where he basically, opened my eyes towards just how challenging a career that can be mental health wise. So he was working for the federal police, and the kind of cases that he was dealing with on a day-to-day basis were not easy things to deal with for anybody.
Hmm.
And then the amount of security clearance you would need would only happen once, I'm an Australian citizen, which would also take a while because at that time I was on my permanent residency in Australia. I just become a permanent resident, and it'd be a longer journey there. Plus, in the industry, if when you start looking for a new job or new opportunities, there are very few opportunities in the forensic space, and there are a lot more in the defense side of the world. So, this conversation also made that clear to me. And that's when I resolved, okay, yes, I acquired some forensic skills the past couple of years, but I need not stop there, and I need to acquire the skills that are needed to successfully defend a company. And
Hmm.
that's a whole different skill set. It's not the same. Of course, there's some overlap, and of course, it helps to have that mindset. But then, that was another kind of journey again.
Yeah, it sounds like you then kind of ran the gamut across a couple of different I suppose a couple of different roles. You were in like incident management, vuln management, building out infrastructure security. What are some of the milestones that stood out? Did you have a plan, or was it this sounds like an interesting opportunity. I'm gonna jump at it and learn a little bit more as you go along.
Yeah, I've been going along basically. And I'm also somebody who learns a lot faster when I'm working on a project actively with a new technology.
Okay.
So, early on, I worked on a lot of the vulnerability and patch management side of things. Early on, I worked on like firewalls and
Okay.
worked with, do you remember this thing called Snort?
Oh yeah, yeah,
Uh,
yeah, of course. Yeah, yeah. They had there was open source detections and rules and stuff like that. I remember parsing those and having loads of fun with them.
Exactly. So I worked with Snort back in the super early days. I
Hmm.
worked of my super early days. I'm sure the security industry has been going way back. But I've worked with I even did racking and stacking of
Oh, wow.
firewalls, physical firewalls in a data center back then, because the cloud as we know it now wasn't popular back then. And that was a very interesting experience working with switches, routers. My networking I had to brush up on a lot because, of course, with the firewall rules as well, there was a fair amount of just knowing how networks and networking work and how IP addresses work and subnets work and all of that. A lot of very useful, essential skills I acquired basically on the go back then. Then when I moved to America, I dived a lot more into vulnerability and patch management because I'd done a little bit of that back in Australia. And here there was a gap at the company where I was working at. Also, technologically, it was very different from a operating system perspective as well. So Australia was Windows through and through. Even, a lot of companies would even use Windows servers. So even on the server side of the world, Linux wasn't as popular, primarily because the workload that a lot of these servers had to deal with was a lot lesser and
Yeah.
minor as compared to the kind of workloads tech companies have to deal with.
Performance wasn't as important for some of these
Exactly.
organizations. So, yeah.
Exactly. Also, the fact that, when a group of people acquire a set of skills, in this case, it happened to be Windows Server Administration, it becomes a lot easier to then collectively manage them. Even though you're working at different companies at different
Mhm.
points of times, you still knowledge share, right? And that journey together, I think for any technology, the individual's journey is far less important than the collective journey. And that's what ends up becoming the norm. So it was also
Yep.
one of those. Yeah.
Nice. So I suppose so then like you started gravitating towards the security engineering and like detection side. What were I suppose what were some of the important lessons that you learned while while deciding to go into the blue team side?
Oh yeah, so the blue team side, I defaulted into it. The manager I was working with at the time, was working on a lot of blue team things. Back where I was, even red teaming was mostly outsourced. So
Okay.
there used to be individual companies and independent companies and teams that would do red teaming for all these other, financial companies or for oil and gas companies. And if you wanted to be employed by one of these companies directly, I think blue teaming was a far safer choice from a career point of view. So that's how I ended up on the blue team. And once I acquired some skills, then it becomes a kind of a cycle, right? Where when you start looking for your next job, a lot of what you play on, your strengths, are already on the blue teaming side. So the next company also decides that you're fit for the blue team, and the one after that, and the one
Yeah.
after that. And then before you know it, you end up acquiring a whole range of skills in a very like specific area. I mean, luckily, blue team, is a wide term. It involves so many different things, vulnerability and patch management being one of them, email security, that I've done, also being one of them. Then when the cloud became a lot more adopted, cloud native security and AWS became a whole new ball game. And it just goes on and on. So
I want to dive into especially like the transition to into cloud security because I know that's the area that you're or an area that you are very focused on at the moment. But before that you landed in Twilio or actually you landed in Segment, which was acquired by Twilio, and they were both, I suppose, almost the definitions of those fast growing tech B2B SaaS companies where you got to basically build out like security detection frameworks. How did you? So, can you tell me about some of the lessons that you learned that you brought into those roles and how you, I suppose how you built out the how if anybody else is starting to build out a detection response or detection and engineering team, how they should go about it.
right. So a lot of what I learned came from different places and different
Yeah, of
experiences.
course.
there were multiple incidents that I was a part of that, I was responding to. And I also learned from my peers a lot. There were things that, certain people, certain teammates in different companies were doing extremely well, I thought. And then I basically collected all that knowledge, mentally made, note of all of it and brought it to Segment. Now, when I came to Segment, the detection and response program was also already getting built. The building of the log collection engine and a few of the alert building was already done. However,
Okay.
there were a lot of opportunities that I could see kind of immediately. And all of them started with the problem of just a huge amount of noise from our detection alerts and detection rules, and like rather low amount of signal, which immediately struck me as a massive challenge.
Opportunity.
Yeah, and massive opportunity, because there was huge time saving opportunities. And then even beyond that, there was a big opportunity to just protect ourselves from burnout,
Yeah.
and protect my teammates, from burnout. So that's where, my head was at. And then when I spoke to leadership, I realized that they were really keen on the automation journey,
Hmm.
and implementing automation as much as possible wherever we can. So I started looking around, and, luckily I didn't have to look too far, because at a security conference, say 4 years before I was working on this project,
Hmm.
I'd met an individual called Ubani. I had heard his talk. He worked at Twilio at the time. He still works at Twilio. Both of us are on the
Nice.
same team now. It's been quite a journey. So back then, I was working at a different company. I'd heard Ubani talk about SOCless as the automation framework, and he had built it out. And I thought there was great potential there. I could see its potential before it even became fully
Mm.
open source. The day I saw it, I was like, yes, this is it. This is the tool I need. So, and 4 years later, when I was kind of looking around, it was still the tool I needed. So that was the tool of choice. And then we kind of continued to build with that framework. We saved a lot of. We saw a reduction of about 40% in the amount of time we were spending to resolve the tickets. Our mean time to resolve went down by about 40%, which is huge.
That's unbelievable. Yeah, it's and just so folks will put it on. Is it still being maintained, SOCless? I'm not.
So SOCless is not actively being maintained
Okay,
anymore.
yeah, but it is and was an inspiration for certainly for times, but and for a whole load of people, it's an incredible an incredible platform and one of the early kind of best practice automation guides and best practice source out there. And what were the sort of things that when you think about automation, what are the sort of things that you would like you said you received a 40% reduction in like mean time to resolve tickets. What was the low hanging fruit? What did you say like this is what we should go after first? And yeah, how did you go about that?
Oh yeah, there was a whole strategy around it. So I basically data crunched on my
Nice.
existing alerts. Luckily, we were, keeping track of all the alerts that were firing daily. And I was able to create some dashboards and some charts on the basis of that to perform some trend analysis. So first I figured out what are some of our noisiest alerts. Next, I figured out what are some of the components of our noisiest alerts that we can automate, because you cannot automate everything. There are sometimes you cannot automate due to technological limitations. The other times you cannot automate because an individual really actually needs to look at it
Yeah.
before the whether or not something is good or bad is unclear. That's when you can't automate. So I figured out all the places where we could clearly define logic for what was good and what was not. Also identified the types of steps that were repeated across different types of alerts. So for example, if there was an IP address involved that needed to be looked up, whether or not it's a legitimate IP address, Now that's a step that's involved in, say, 5 out of our 20 alerts, and that's
Yeah.
a big amount. So that also got a priority. So automating that step would mean we would take care, one automation would take care of 5 things at the same time. And that's how we went about it. So prioritized by the frequency of the alerts, and then prioritized by the specific individual investigation steps that are repeated the most frequently.
Fantastic, yeah, and like it's funny. People, a lot of folks will dive in and just start automating straight away, and to a certain extent, you can get a little bit, go a little bit, uh, or do that a tiny bit. But yeah, if you want to be successful, you do have to crunch the numbers, you do have to do some analysis, and you do have to. But ultimately, you'll be way more successful because you'll have taken that step back and viewed from the top. This is going to be where we're going to be the most effective. Um. How did the team benefit? What did you like? Do they become? You said you did it to help reduce burnout, to help improve satisfaction. Did it, and did you measure the success of that?
Yes, so the mean time to resolve, going down was one of them. That was a big criteria.
Hmm.
Then the next one was the fact that we were dealing with all the alerts with the same priority, the way it was set up. An alert would fire and the expectation was somebody jump on it immediately. Well, that didn't need to be true.
Yeah, of
So
course.
there was automation, that was the next logical extension. There was automation involved there as well. And what we did was basically assigned ratings to different alerts based on the automations that ran and the results they fetched. And those were auto-assigned severity ratings essentially. And what that did was that kind of, instead of having to respond to everything immediately, like now, it gave us the opportunity to assign different SLAs to different severity of alerts. And that also, gave people a lot more time, because now people had up to a week. Whenever somebody was on call, they had up to a week to respond to certain low priority alerts, and the high priority alerts got the urgency they
Yeah, which
deserve.
is so important because I worked in incident response for yeah, by well, several years anyway, about 10 years, and I got on the blue team before starting Tynes. But it's that, like, the pattern interrupt where you're trying to do work and then something comes in, and it becomes almost like that, adrenaline rush where you're looking at whatever Facebook or looking at Instagram or looking at TikTok, where you're like, I should look at that straight away. So but, like, assigning the severity and giving people the freedom to actually, I don't need to look at that straight away, means that they can focus on doing the much more impactful work that they should be doing, rather than that pattern interrupt, and rather than that, is this going to be the incident that's going to take us down, that you feel so scared about. um I want to talk about then. So coincidentally, it seems that it doesn't sound like Segment was acquired because you were like, oh, Twilio seems like they're the crew that have a good security team. But I want to talk about that acquisition process, because when companies get acquired, it's really hard to, first of all, to merge technologies. But how did you go about deciding, hey, this is something that we're doing really good on the Segment side, and this is something we're doing really good on, or the Twilio team are doing really good on, and I suppose merging the teams, merging practices, merging technologies. How did that go about?
So that process, I would say, it went on for almost a year, over a year,
Wow,
because
yeah,
when such huge companies merge with each other, things don't just change overnight.
no,
Like beyond security, also, there's so much streamlining that was required even on the IT side. And since this was a proper, full merger, um, IT took care of a lot of things first. They had to, because things like even our octas were separate.
yeah,
That's the most basic of it, and those were completely separate. Some were using the web authent technology while the others weren't using, and there was a lot of streamlining that went on. A lot of these decisions came from leadership. From a detection response point of view, the basically, um, the team's incident response capabilities merged. I was one of the facilitators of that merger.
Brilliant.
And our team was the incident response team as well as the detection engineering team. And we were doing both building as well as responding side of the work. And since Twilio already had a responder team, it made sense for for there to be only one responder team.
Yep.
And that transfer, a lot of knowledge transfer was required once the technology access was managed. That was actually the hardest part, to make sure that both the teams have access to everything that the other team has access to.
Yep.
And once that was done, I did a lot of the knowledge transfer, and the cert capabilities were transferred over. That was also the time when I personally, individually switched teams, and I became a part of the security platform engineering team, which was a kind of natural progression as well as a natural fit, because I was already working with them on a lot of things at that time. And 3 out of 5 days, I was actually working with the security platform engineering, and 2 days with detection engineering. So
Fascinating.
yeah.
When you say security platform engineering, just so if folks understand, that means working with working with your product team, making sure that I suppose the platform is secure. So working on things like Kubernetes and GCP, AWS, that sort of thing.
Yes, so security platform engineering at Twilio is really unique in that we have the essentially the entire security organization, and also possibly engineering organization as our customers. And that varies project by project. Now, the security platform engineering team was initially, the team to help when it was built out. It was the team that would help with a lot of the automation type of things, building a lot of different capabilities in house for various partner teams and various customer teams, so to speak. And it's still doing that. So, say for example,
Yeah.
the container monitoring and sys audit and file integrity monitoring project that the team ran, that I was also part of, was had cloud security as a customer, detection response engineering as a customer, engineering, product engineering as a customer, and so on and so forth. Similarly, in the GCP side of the world, that project was run by cloud security. But since I had expertise on segment side of the world and how things work there, I was involved from that point of view, as well as helping out wherever I could and learn about a lot more about GCP as well. So the team has been doing. There's another project related to data and matrix that helps the entire security organization and the leadership to collect essentially data and matrix around a lot of the work that they're doing, to be
Mhm.
able to quantify the impact of the work that they're doing. So that's also something that's taken care of by security platform engineering. And so on and so forth, basically. So we are essentially a team that has the entire security organization as our customer, as well as the engineering.
How do you it's kind of kind of interesting. The first question is like, I suppose, how do you manage the competing priorities, but also like how do you hire correctly for that team as well? You've obviously had a very interesting background, but it feels that um yeah, a lot of the time when you're trying to work with the platform teams, they respect people who have worked with them before that know you're nodding. So that they yeah, I suppose how do you go about convincing them that actually, I'm legit and I should be a good stakeholder, and I'm, that what I bring to the table is worthwhile for all of us to, to partner.
So I haven't done any of the hiring myself on this
Okay,
team.
yeah.
The team was already built out, but I can speak about what the people who did the hiring might have thought about, and that has
Yeah.
really worked for us. One is the diversity of skill set. So, the current composition of team is such that there are individuals who have deep expertise in building out like data and matrix platforms. There are individuals who have deep expertise in they are kind of this back end, front end mixed type of skill set, and they could also build a front end for you if given the opportunity and given they are interested in it at the time. People who are really good at just picking skills up on the go, and we all basically acquire skills on the kind of as needed basis in terms of the projects that demand them. So just very open-minded, curious people with some existing skills and a lot of just interest in various technologies in general, and the openness to work with everything.
I love it. How did you go about, I suppose, upskilling in like cloud security or upskilling in like that kind of security platform engineering side? That it's for a lot of folks, I think a lot of people in the detection and response side of the house, or even on the detection engineering side of the house, they're looking now at, well, tools like Lacework and Wiz and Orca, but also they're looking at AWS, and it's a little bit intimidating sometimes to be like, hey, how do I get into that? How did you approach it? How did you break in?
So that was a conscious choice, not something I fell into.
Okay, good.
When I was working at Pandora was completely, a bare metal infrastructure. They had their own data centers, and I believe a huge part of the company still does, and that's, a good thing. That's a great thing. However, at the time I wanted to acquire skills on the AWS side of things, and as I mentioned earlier, I'm somebody who learns the best when on the job and just
Yeah.
thrown in the deep end. And I was very lucky to have found a team that enabled me to do exactly that. That was also the time when I was when I started doing coding professionally for the first time.
Mhm.
Before that, a lot of the security jobs that I was a part of, both Impex and Pandora, they did not require coding on a day-to-day basis. They did not require that skill set to be used in that way at all. But when I went to Marqeta and met the team that I did, the two top of minds were I wanted to learn building log pipelines. I wanted to
Love it.
use coding in my kind of day-to-day basis, and I wanted to brush up on my Python, as well as I wanted to learn a lot more about cloud, AWS and how does AWS work. And Marqeta team enabled me to do exactly that.
Love
They
it.
were very supportive, had a great set of mentors there who would, whenever I would, ask questions to my mentors, I would explicitly tell them, hey, don't just do it for me. Can you please tell me how to do it? And if I were to learn about it from scratch today, and if you weren't there, how do I go about learning this thing? They would give me resources. I started to read AWS's basically the documents that describe all the different commands that you can run on different services and
Yeah.
what all you can do with it. So just a lot of just Googling, a lot of reading other people's blogs, a lot of trying that out in my existing project or whatever I was trying to do. And a lot of just mapping certain jargon in my brain, right? So what I noticed was on both IAM side of things as well as the security groups and rules side of things, the logic was the same as your traditional firewalls and Active Directory and so
Yeah.
on. Just the names changed. So then I just had to learn new jargon, and I mapped my existing knowledge with this new information, and basically made it sit in my head in that way as well. So there are different ways in which I learned about AWS, and that was also, again, I was one of the early-ish adopters back
Yeah.
then. And that came in very handy later on in the subsequent jobs that I was a part of.
I love it. And have you found, I suppose, those paradigms true when dealing with incidents and when dealing with, I suppose, yeah, when when actually like applying it to two jobs? Yeah.
Sorry,
So
what
have
did
you,
you
I
say?
suppose, have you found, no, when you're saying you mapped from from Active Directory to yeah, Kubernetes or whatever, have you found those, I suppose, the mappings have they've stayed true when dealing with incidents and things like that as well?
Oh, 100%.
Love it.
A lot of it has stayed true. A lot of it is completely new, of course, and you learn it the more you do it. But
Yeah.
they have, for most parts, they have stayed true. So the logic, I mean, around in like traffic in general, right, and the way you manage it with firewalls, the top rule always gets the highest priority, followed by the next rule, followed by the next rule, and so on and so forth. Definitely, do not allow all in terms of incoming traffic as
Yeah.
much as possible, and those types of things. All of it has mapped one to one from physical firewalls to
Yeah.
AWS. So and the things that have been new have been things like the IAM roles and then the role policies. Those were completely new concepts for me, at least. And though that was a bit of a learning curve, but the more you do it, the more it just sits in your brain, and it becomes a second nature after a
Yeah.
point.
Yeah, and yeah, genuinely just getting involved and using it practically helps enormously. It can be hard in the abstract, but getting involved, yeah, putting it to work, you're kind of forced to learn it. How do you stay on top of new trends? And is there any new trends that you think are coming down the line? Like you said you made a conscious decision, in Marquetta. Hey, this is an area I want to go to. What's for anybody listening, like what's yeah, what's Prima thinking? Hey, this is what I want to learn in so in 5 years time I'm on top of things.
Yeah, so back then, as I said, AWS was a conscious decision. Then, more recently, Kubernetes has been a
Yeah,
conscious decision. GCP has been a conscious decision.
yeah,
And, with GCP, I'd say I'm still not, deep enough. So eventually, at some point, I'd want to get more depth there.
yeah.
For Kubernetes security, I think I'd want to learn a lot more about just how eBPF works, and
Mhm.
even try creating a small kind of detection daemon myself if I can.
Yeah,
Because that involves a lot of just kind of, it's a steep learning curve. Machine learning, I have not ever touched. So that's something that I want to first learn about properly, and then identify opportunities to apply that. And I already have some ideas for where I could possibly apply it. And detection and response engineering is, I think, ripe for taking when it comes down to machine learning. It's just I don't quite know yet how I would go about it, and I haven't had the opportunity to do so either. So, when the time comes, I'll be the first one to jump on it.
I love it. You've mentioned kind of throughout the interview, you've mentioned a couple of people that have had a big effect on your career, and it sounds like yeah, mentoring is something that's super important. How's I suppose first of all, do you mentor anybody on your end, and how does that, I suppose, how has that informed your career trajectory and your approach to yeah, to security?
Yeah, for sure. So I got mentored a lot early career for sure. And I do mentor individuals. I'm not actively mentoring anybody at the moment, but I'm definitely open to it. If you think I'm somebody you'd like to talk to in any capacity for about your career, by you I mean the
No, no,
listeners.
of course, yeah, yeah, yeah,
Yeah, if anybody thinks they'd like to reach out, I'm not actively mentoring anybody right now, so now is a great time. I have mentored individuals in the past, a lot of junior folks who have asked for advice on both career growth as well as just specific, projects or specific, just generic career advice in general. At work, that's definitely been a thing. A lot of, I'd say passive mentoring goes on still, but that's more on the technical side of the wheelhouse. So a lot of the knowledge that I've acquired about that's technology specific, about Segment, for example, and how different components kind of tie together. Up until basically Q4 last year, I was doing a lot of that knowledge transfer. Individuals would reach out if there were new and interesting things that they were seeing that they had never seen before. There was no documents about. They would reach out and ask, hey, do you know about this? Hey, what do we do? Is it okay to decommission this for this particular thing, for example? And nobody really knows who spun it up, and then I'd go about investigating it and so on and so forth. So in that, and I always make a point to have these even helping sessions be recorded and be shadowed. So I have in the past done that, and that's worked successfully. That whenever somebody asks for help, and if that help is longer than say 30 minutes, it takes me more than 30 minutes to do that particular thing. Or if it's very technology specific or just kind of tribal knowledge specific thing, I just open a Zoom session and post the link in the team channel and invite
Stop.
whoever wants to join to shadow me. And that way they get to learn more about that particular problem, and I get to offload that information, and make it available to everybody. I don't believe in hoarding information in any way, shape, or form. It only
No.
slows us all down.
Yeah, especially, well, I was going to say especially in security, but it's not just especially in security, it's everywhere. It's in engineering, in like site reliability engineering, it's in like, yeah, even in sales, hoarding and information doesn't make you more successful. Like sharing makes, the company and everybody else more successful as well. And you've been very like, it's funny, yeah, you're like quite like it's great to see you, I suppose, speak at conferences and share that knowledge. Is there anything like that you've worked on that you're particularly proud of, that you've said, hey, this is some of the work that I've really enjoyed sharing, that I've like your work with SOCless you've blogged about, but is there anything that you're like, hey, this is the work that I'm really proud of and I really like sharing from the top of the rooftops?
Yeah, there were quite a few moments there. So, SOCless was one of them. The other one was when I was able to successfully, spin up a fleet host. That's again, shout out. That's another security company now. They are really cool people. Also have an open source offering, and I was able to host their open source offering on Kubernetes with a lot of just trial and error. And there were places where I was badly scratching my head about how could this be possibly done. And it was a collective learning process, which was successful in the end, and that was quite a learning journey for me. So that one I loved sharing with the world. I've written a blog post about it as well. And then the self-service tooling that we were able to build, I was able to build a large part of it for our engineering partners. So we built sys audit and FIM self-service tools such that different teams are able to specify what file paths they want to monitor, and they are able to specify which of the infrastructure fleets do those file paths be monitored in. And that was really powerful for our engineering partners to be able to do wire code and with a kind of fill in the blanks type of quick template.
I
So
Yeah, I love both of those examples. First of all, yeah, shout out to the Fleet crew, FleetDM. We'll post a link in the show notes if anybody wants to check them out. Yeah, we're big fans of them here at Tynes. And then yeah, like it's when we think about detection engineering and you think about like yeah, I suppose making sure that your partners get on board, that self-service and the ability to, hey, you can go here and kick off a scan, you can go here and download the like the latest config or whatever. But yeah, I saw your post as well about being able to set up some file integrity monitoring. It's super sharp, super easy. It even sends it to a Slack channel with a quick notification to say like, hey, this is this is set up and these are the alerts that are associated with it. It's really yeah, really powerful and definitely just makes the lives of your partners easier. Um, I don't want to use that as I don't want to use that as saying like, hey, well, where do you think security or where do you think security is going? But when you think about, yeah, you've talked a little bit about machine learning. You've obviously talked about the shift to like, yeah, GCP and Kubernetes and ECS and EKS. But when you think about security operations teams and detection response teams and detection engineering teams in a couple of years' time, in 5 years' time, what do you think they'll look like?
Um, So I don't see anything being wildly different even in
Yeah.
5 years from where it is today. A lot of evolutions, I believe, happen really gradually, where, 5 years from today, maybe 2 out of 10 technologies might be different. 10 years from today, maybe 5 out of 10 technologies might be different. But then the shifts are never really that dramatic either. The dramatic shifts only really happen once in a blue moon, has been my experience, because the
Okay.
breakthroughs in technology itself don't happen that frequently, right? The real, big breakthroughs take at least half a decade to a decade before they like happen again. Basically, the pace of security and security teams is going to be always in pace with the pace, always in sync with the pace of innovation. And wherever you see the technological landscape going, security will inevitably follow. That's just been my observation and my, last decade of work so far.
That's
Uh,
Yeah, that's quite a yeah, quite a reasonable and mature take on this take on where we're going. I totally get it. So I know you've shared out to a couple of people who are listening. If you were to give one piece of advice to people listening in who are working in security teams at like fast growing companies like he listed off some amazing companies like a Marketo, like a Pandora, like a Twilio. What would you tell them?
I'd say find projects that excite you, acquire new skills in whichever way works the best for you. For some people, it's through pet projects, non-work related personal projects
Hmm.
is how they acquire skills, and it's a lot of fun for them. For some, it's through projects at work. Be unafraid to put your hands up for things you know nothing about, because you can always learn. There are always people who know more than you about any given topic on any given day, and be open enough to and humble enough to ask them, and be open enough to reach out to them when you need to. Your career is not just your career; it's collective journey, as I mentioned earlier as well. And you will only be as successful as the individuals you are able to empower and enable. So hoarding information might seem like the way to protect your job, but it's also unfortunately the way to stifle your growth. um, the more you share, the more you will learn in different ways. That's the only thing I can say.
I love it. Yeah, and it's true knowledge, it's true credit as well. Giving thanks to other people, sharing that will well, it'll make them feel good, but it'll come back to you as well. Prima, unfortunately that's all we're gonna have time for, but it was such a pleasure having you on. Thank you so much for joining us. Um if anybody wants to follow your journey, wants to learn a little bit more, where can they go or how can they follow you?
Oh yeah, for sure. Everyone can follow me on Twitter. I am Security Nerdette. It's like the female version of nerd. Not sure if it's a real word, but I created it for sure, if it isn't real. And on LinkedIn, I am Prima Virani, my first name and my last name. You can find me on either spots, and please feel free to reach out. It was a pleasure talking to you as well. And thank you so much for being such a wonderful and gracious host. It
Thank
was
you.
wonderful talking to you.
Thank you so much. And yeah, I hope to have you on again at some stage in the future.